Hey, welcome to Square Body Stuff. I'm Chad, and we're going to be working on the 339 stroker again, so we can get an old squeaky one of these days. All right, a couple things I want to accomplish in this video is we're going to be checking the cylinder bore. We're going to be measuring all those, and we're also going to be checking the deck height. Now, to measure the cylinder bores, I'm going to be using my dial bore gauge again. I've got videos on how to set that all up and everything. Go check those out. I think I've got most of this stuff in a playlist for this 339 stroker. I have already checked my pistons. That's in another video also. Got all the diameters of the pistons wrote down here. And they all came out the same. Now I've got to go through and write down my bore diameter and then find my clearance. This is just another step of the process to make sure everything is right. Because machinists are humans too, and they could have made a mistake. And it's up to me or you as an engine builder to double check everything. Because after that, after you assemble it, there's no excuses. You need to double check everything. Now, if you're wondering what kind of piston clearance you should have, there's a few factors that go into that. If you're working with stock replacement stuff, most of your manuals will have that, or you can find that information online. I think basically a rule of thumb is roughly around a thousandth of clearance per inch of bore. That's usually a good rough idea to have. And if your pistons come with paperwork, and you got manufacturer's recommendations, go off of them. And these are some DSS racing pistons. Really cool stuff. They're a really cool company. They're all USA made, all forged right here in the United States, up there in Illinois. And their recommendations is for 3.7 to 4.2 bore, which this is a 3.796 bore, is 3.5 to 5 thousandths for the 4032 alloy. And so far what I've measured on these, I kind of goofed up on that one, but 37975, and that gets us a 4.8. So we're right on the top end of the clearance, which is fine with me. I would rather have them in this application because I'm going to be running nitrous. I'd rather it be a little bit on the loose side. Now, when you go to measure the bores, you want to measure close to the top. I like to measure on the piston, or not measure on the piston, but measure down in the bore about the distance where you're measuring your piston diameter, which is right there. You can see here on their picture, this is where you measure your piston diameter, and that's roughly where I like to measure the bore at, about the same distance down. Hopefully I explained this right, what makes sense in my head. That's at the point of where your piston is going to be rocking a little bit, and that's where it's most critical, I guess, for piston clearance. If you have it too loose, that piston can start rocking real bad, and you can shatter a skirt. At the bottom of the bore, same thing. That's where it kind of rocks over. But anyways, that's where I like to measure it. So I'll show you how to put the bore gauge in there and get your measurement and see what we got on this thing. All right, let me start on cylinder number 2. Let's get the dial bore gauge in there, get it down to about the depth you want it, and start rocking it back and forth to get your measurement. Okay, and write it down. About all there is to it. Go through and check this one. You can check different ways just to make sure you're round. I'll get you a little different angle in here so I can show you where I'm measuring. Just about an inch, inch and a half down, and just slowly rock it back and forth. And while you're rocking it back and forth, that dial will go down and stop, go back up, and wherever it stops and starts to go back down, that's your measurement. And right now at 0, I got this upside down, there we go. Right now at 0 is my actual, supposed to be my bore diameter, 3.796. So whatever over I am of that, I just got to add that much to that number. And when I took this block down to the machine shop to have it bored and all the work done to it, I had the pistons, so they knew exactly where I want, and I told them where I was wanting my tolerances at. So that's pretty much where it came out. They've done an excellent job. They put a really nice hone on this thing. They've got I can't remember what process they used, but he knew what rings I was using. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what material the rings are made out of. But anyways, they knew what rings I was using, the material pistons I was using, knew how much clearance I was going to need for sure, and knew what kind of a finish to put on the cylinder walls to make sure my rings seat and seal the way they're supposed to. All right, now we got our tolerances for our piston and cylinder wall clearance. Our sheet is filling up, getting some measurements down here, getting closer and closer to being able to go to the final assembly on this thing. But we still got a few things to check. The next thing I want to go over is the deck height. So I'm going to start putting these pistons in the respective holes because everything is matched and numbered to where they're supposed to go, and it's got to stay that way until final assembly. Just assemble with some light oil. I don't have my clips and my pins yet because these are floating pins. I don't have those in there yet because these will be coming back apart. I just got to make sure I don't monkey around and let one of them pins, you know, hit the cylinder wall while I'm rolling around checking stuff. But for right now, they're just rough assembled, all clean. Cylinder walls are clean, so I'm gonna throw these in there and start checking my deck height. Well, they're all in there and everything clears. If you go to my clearancing video I just put out a few days ago, you'll know I had to clearance the block to clear these rods. These are 6-inch rods with 7/16 bolts. They're 4-stroker application, but in a 350 block or a bigger block. You know, these smaller bores for this 305, I had to do some clearancing, but everything clears now. This is the first time I've had this engine this far together since I've been building on it, so it's kind of cool. For right now, I just want to go. A couple things I want to mention. The cylinder walls, I put a light coating of like WD-40 on the cylinder walls just to have a little bit of lubrication. I don't want to put the pistons in there dry. Of course, I got lube on the bearings, lube on the bolts for the rod caps, And I didn't torque the rods down to spec. I just torqued them down like 30 pounds. They don't have to be completely torqued down right now, just to check this. Another thing I'm going to do while we're here is check my rod side clearance. But we'll go over the deck height first, then we'll do the rod side clearance. I'm going to do this the way I normally do it. I'll put this on the back of the block. I will zero my dial indicator out. It's already zeroed. And put it across the cylinder. Put your pin right in the middle of the piston, because if you put it on the outside edge, you're going to have some rock. And you shouldn't have any rock the other way. You have a little bit of rock there. And you turn your crank one way or the other. Alright, we're coming right out on zero. Now that's my preferred method of checking deck height on these. I'll go through and check every cylinder, write everything down. Another way you could do it, if you had a good straight edge, I'm not talking about a wooden ruler or a framing square or anything like that, a good machinist straight edge and feeler gauges, you could do the same thing. Or if you have depth gauge, you can use that too, but the only problem is you still have to use some sort of dial indicator or something to know when you're completely at top dead center. And that's why I prefer using this bridge with the dial indicator on it. You know exactly what's at the very top, and you can take your measurement from there. Now we got our deck height all measured out and documented. Next thing I'm going to do while I have this bottom end assembled is to check the rod side clearance. And what I mean by that is the rod side clearance is the amount of room in between your connecting rods on the big end. Now there's a couple different ways you can measure that. You can actually measure the rod journal with an inside micrometer on the crankshaft, and then measure your rods, squish them together, measure them with the micrometer, and do the math, and you'll find the difference. It works. I usually don't do that. It's more of a pain to try to get your inside measurement on your crankshaft. And if you have a radius and all that stuff, I just don't prefer that method, but it is doable. I like to do it this way with the dial indicator. Another way you could do it is use feeler gauges, and I'll show you how to do both ways. Now to use this with the dial indicator, get it on a good spot on your rod, pull it forward or backwards, whichever way, zero your dial out, then it's just a matter of pushing it the other direction. And that is your rod side clearance. Now if you want to use a feeler gauge, that works too. Nothing wrong with that. You just basically, it's easy as, you know, sticking the feeler gauge in between the rod journals. You don't want to go sawing on it or nothing like that. Slide it in there, and that's how you check with the feeler gauge. Nothing to it. Now for how much side clearance you really need, the rule of thumb that I've gone by is for the minimum, you'll want at least 4 times the bearing clearance. So for round numbers, if you have 3 thousandths bearing clearance on your rods, you'll want 12 thousandths of clearance between your connecting rods. A lot of that is for a couple things. You'll want oil flow, but you don't want too much. But you have to have at least enough oil to flowing around there to lubricate the sides of the rods. But you don't want too much to where your oil just comes out and slings all over your cylinder walls and creates a big frothy mess in your oil pan. That's kind of an extreme case, but you also want enough clearance, depending on your application, for your rods to expand a little bit. You don't want them too tight. Again, I've said it before, I subscribe to the looser is better idea, without going too extreme. You don't want something so sloppy it rattles around, but you want enough room for things to get hot, swell up if you have an issue or just under extreme pressure. So I'm running at 21 thousandths on this first journal pair. I'm happy with that. That was really where I was shooting for. Like I said, if you go a little bit too much, you could have issues with oil control, but it's not as bad as if you went too tight. Because if you get too tight, your rod's going to swell up and they're going to pinch and seize up and cause lots of problems. And we don't like problems. Now I'm going to go ahead and run through all these, get them all documented, and then we will move on to the next step. I got all the clearances checked and everything is good. I'm happy with that. Got it all documented. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some eyeballs on every nook and cranny in this thing while this crank and rods and everything's in here to make sure I've got plenty of clearance everywhere. You know, everything spins freely, but you also need to make sure, especially if you're using aftermarket parts, make sure you still got plenty of room for everything to move around, everything to grow a little bit. This is a good time to catch it at this stage of the process, because we're going to be pulling this back out. I think I'll probably be putting this back together, mocking it up or dry fit, however you want to call it, possibly one more time before it's final assembly. Yeah, I'm not real sure there yet, but I know for at least one more thing I need to check with the rods and pistons in there before I final assembly it. We'll go over that later. But yeah, I'm going to go through here, check everything out. Now, I already noticed one thing while I was monkeying around with measuring everything out. Number 8 rod bolt is really close to the block. It's not touching. I'm going to look at it real close to see if it's got enough clearance or if I need to go ahead and give it a little bit more room. Wouldn't be a bad idea, just go ahead and give it more room to be on the safe side. But I'll show you that real quick. I know it's kind of hard to see, but right there, it's just, I'd say it's got a good 20-30 thousandths, which might be plenty. But I think I might take just a little bit more out. You know, it won't take just a few minutes to give it just a little bit more clearance, a little bit more peace of mind. I think this is a good stopping point on this video. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you guys are learning something, and hopefully it's not what not to do, because I do show that sometimes on this channel. Yeah, hopefully you get some education out of this, or maybe a little bit of entertainment. I don't know, but it's good stuff. I love doing this. This is my happy place, building engines. This is my favorite mechanical thing to do, is to build engines. So I'm kind of in my happy place right now, and you guys get to hang out with me while I do it, and that's great. And I get to show other people how I do stuff. Now, that's another disclaimer. I'm showing you how I do stuff and how I've done stuff for years. All right, I think I'm done rambling. I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for hanging out. Till next time, y'all keep your square bodies rolling, or your engines building, or just get your shop work done. Catch you later.